everyone, I'm Olivia Speranza, and we are here at Sony Live. This is our very first live stream on Amazon, and what we're going to be doing today is talking to some experts, and our panel is consisting of Sony product experts and experts in photography. So what we're going to do is talk about the brand new announced Sony RX1R and the RX100 II. Now, before we get into your questions, and you guys can, of course, tweet us using the hashtag SonyLive, and just go ahead and type in your questions at the bottom of the live stream player in the log box. What we're going to do now is just have our panelists introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Weir. I'm the Senior Technical Manager for Sony Digital Imaging.
My name is Jeff Berlin. I am a professional photographer and a Sony artisan of imagery.
And my name is Amy Koppmann. I am in charge of content creation and training for the digital imaging group with Sony.
All right, great. Now, what we're going to do is just jump right into our questions. And this first one comes from Enigma Arts Photo on Twitter. And Amy, this one's for you.
Okay.
So they want to know, does the screen flip all the way around on this like it does on the alpha cameras, or is it just a tilt?
Well, I assume we're talking about the RX100 II in this case. That does have a tilting screen now. The screen does not tilt all the way around. There is a flash shoe on the top, so if you're using accessories, it would get in the way of that. But it does angle up and down. So if you're doing shots of your kids, and you don't want to get just the tops of their heads, you want their eye level. You can tilt the screen up and hold the camera down and still see your shot. Or if you're in a crowd, you can hold it up over your head as well if you're not quite as tall as I am, or as some people. You're able to get a great shot from just about any angle.
So you can still use that screen in a wide application?
Oh, most definitely,
yeah.
Most definitely.
Okay, great. All right, so our next question is coming from ZVB. This is from Twitter. Mark, this question's for you. All right, ZVB wants to know, is there GPS in the RX100 II? And if not, can we use the Wi-Fi capability to get geotagging in the photos from the phone?
Unfortunately not. The size and the compactness of RX100 eliminate the opportunity to put in a GPS receiver. Also, the metal body construction would limit GPS reception. In terms of the Wi-Fi, it's designed entirely for linkage with smart devices, so no ability to download into the camera from GPS sources. No.
Okay, all right, very straightforward there. All right, so we have our second question. This one's coming from Matt Stewart. This question came from Google+, and Jeff, this question is for you. Matt wants to know, have you tested the cameras at night, and how have they performed in that low lighting?
I have used the cameras at night. The other night I went down to Beverly Hills, and I do have a couple pictures that I uploaded. And with the RX100 II, one of the things that's really nice is that with the new sensor, you get a 40% increase in sensitivity at night. And so it gave me about a stop advantage for ISO. I got a terrific low noise, and it was able to have a wider aperture, a more shallow depth of field if I chose. And with the RX1, I also did a shot down on Rodeo Drive, and focus was really quick, and again, the noise was really low, and just with the camera on all auto, I got it back to my computer at home, and I opened it up, and the resolution and the sharpness, it was really extraordinary.
Good, excellent. So nice low noise capabilities there.
Terrific.
Across the platform on both of those cameras.
On both.
Okay, all right, let's hit the next question. So this one comes from Patrick Cassidy. This is from Twitter. Amy, this question is for you. So how will the NFC work between the RX cameras and, say, an Xperia smartphone?
Okay, great question. NFC is only in the RX100 Mark II. It is actually our first CyberShot camera with NFC capability built in. And it'll work great with an Xperia phone with NFC, but it's not just Xperia phones that have NFC. NFC is an industry standard, if you will. So it will work with other smartphones and tablets that do have NFC. But keep in mind, just because a product has NFC doesn't mean it'll necessarily work together. So if you have a speaker with NFC, there will be no interaction with the camera there. So don't expect miracles in that sense.
All right, so know what the limitations are on that, basically.
Correct, but like our new Xperia phones do have NFC, our tablet has NFC, and there's a variety of phones out there. And it's very simple, it's very easy to use. You've seen it probably in commercials where you just touch the two devices together. You'll get an indicator on the screen that tells you they're connected. Now, depending on what mode the camera's in, the NFC will trigger one of two different options, basically. If I'm in shooting mode, I'm out taking pictures and I touch my camera to my NFC smartphone, as long as I have the Play Memories app installed, and it's available for Android or iOS, as long as I have that app installed on my phone, it'll automatically start the remote control function on the smartphone. So now I can put the camera down and then just use my smartphone to take pictures without even touching the camera. In playback mode, as I'm reviewing my images with NFC, it'll allow me to push those images to my phone and then use it for uploading to basically any app that I may have on my phone. So my work email, Twitter, Facebook, anything like that. So it's really a nice option. In that it is kind of an industry standard. So it isn't just Sony specific, but it is available in the RX100 Mark II.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, so we're going to go on to our next question here. And this one is from Enigma Arts Photo, another one. This is via Twitter. Mark, this question is for you. Now, is the low light gain on the RX100 Mark II just that the ISO goes up to now 12,800, or is there also reduced noise in the 1600 to 3200 as well?
Sure. It's a great question. The increased sensitivity from the RX1R sensor allows about 40% greater sensitivity, and what you'll find is lower noise at equivalent ISOs by a factor of about 1 stop. So an RX100 Mark II shooting at ISO 3200 will be about the same noise level as what you would expect in an RX100 at ISO 1600. That's going to continue at lower ISOs down to about ISO 400 and ISO 800. The effect is going to become lesser and lesser at lower ISOs, but the base sensitivity of the RX1R sensor in the RX100 Mark II a little bit higher than that of the RX1R sensor that's in the RX100.
Okay, all right, thanks, Mark. All right, that brings us to our next question. This one comes from Shantu Nigma from Google+. Amy, this question's for you. Can I now use the new Sony watch as a remote for either of these cameras?
At this time, no, you cannot. And this kind of goes back to the fact that just because a device has Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or NFC doesn't mean it'll necessarily work together. Okay. So at this point in time, the Sony watch is not compatible with the RX100 Mark II.
Do you think that might be something in the future we can look forward to?
Oh, there's also, the future is vast. There's all sorts of cool things coming down the line. But at this point in time, no. No is the simple answer.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Our next question comes from Dennis Platinum Photos. And Mark, this question is for you. Dennis is bummed that there is no built-in viewfinder, and he would like to know why.
Well, primarily due to the size objective that we try to realize with the RX100 and also the RX1. Our primary focus was to keep the cabinet size small, to make a camera that's truly shirt pocketable size. And to include an eye-level viewfinder of any type, either optical or electronic, would cause the camera to be a good bit taller. It's important to realize that even though there are cameras with eye-level finders that realize this cabinet size, none of them have the image sensor size that you would that these cameras feature. So image sensor size together with the lens that's necessary to illuminate that sensor really dictates a lot of what's in the cabinet. If we were to increase the cabinet size to include an eye-level finder in the camera itself, it would certainly make the camera larger. You wouldn't be able to put it in your shirt pocket. Now, of course, the options available And I understand that having the eye-level viewfinder on the outside of the camera isn't the same as having it built in, but we felt that the opportunity for the user to add it as an option was the best approach, so that those users who require an eye-level shooting experience have the choice, but we didn't want to increase the overall size of the camera to cause it to be built in. But we understand the value of built-in, but it couldn't be realized within the same cabinet size. So that was the decision that we made.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mark. All right, so our next question comes from Harold66 from Amazon.com. Mark, this question is again for you. What is the frame rate and the max definition of the new electronic viewfinder for the RX100 Mark II?
Well, the viewfinder, the EV1MK, is not actually new. We introduced this last year with the RX1. We don't have a spec for the refresh rate, but it's pretty quick. And keep in mind, the refresh rate of OLED is a different specification from the refresh rate of LCD, because we're not scanning the individual dots sequentially in the context, which is the case with LCD, where there's a scan for R, a scan for G, and a scan for B. Each scan of the field covers all of the colors in OLED. From a resolution standpoint, this is an XGA resolution screen. It's about 2.4 megadots, 2.369. So it's really the same OLED finder device that we've used in a number of cameras. But again, it's the use of OLED instead of LCD, which is what's common with attachable electronic eye-level viewfinders, that makes the difference, because OLED gives you much higher contrast and much faster responsiveness, because you don't have to perform sequential scan that is the case with LCD. So it's really quite an excellent viewing experience with OLED.
All right.
I could add something, actually. I have a lot of experience using this viewfinder and the viewfinder in some of the alpha DSLRs that Sony makes, like such as the A99 and the A77. It's the same viewfinder screen inside the electronic viewfinder. And often when because I shoot mostly celebrity, fashion, beauty, and some documentary, a lot of the time when I'm in studio especially, I will set my camera to manual focus, and I will use the electronic viewfinder to manually focus in studio. And it's bright, there's plenty of contrast, plenty of detail. It's never really, there's no issue with transitioning from an optical viewfinder to an electronic viewfinder.
So it's something you trust?
Very much so.
Okay.
And my results, are terrific. I'm sharp through, it's terrific.
Nice. So
Yeah.
again, you trust it without the false color or the softness. You know the focus is there.
Well, once you have the diopter set for your eye, my pictures are tack sharp.
Right
So
on.
it's no problem.
Okay, all right, let's go to the next question. This one comes from SD Warman. This is Twitter. Jeff, this question is for you. How much real difference can one really see between the photos taken with the RX1 versus the RX1R cameras?
I think it's going to be it's a very subtle type of difference that you'll see. I think when you blow up a print really large, I think that in some fine detail you will see some enhancement to the resolution. I think what you will see most between the RX1 and the RX1R, with that anti-aliasing filter that has been removed in the RX1R, I think you need to be a little bit more attentive to the repeatable patterns in rigging on a sailboat or fences and things like that might be in your shot, because you can find some moire and artifacts.
Okay, and while we're just on that subject, I wanted to maybe bring this to you, Mark, because you and I have spoken before about this. The RX1 compared to the RX1R, we really want to make sure that people sort of understand that it's not really an upgrade. And if you want to go into that just kind of briefly and touch on why it's not an upgrade, because I think maybe some people are going to think this is the newest one. It's newer, it's better, it's cooler. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Sure, Olivia. It's important to understand the role of optical low-pass filter removal, which is something that's become very popular just over the last few months, or 6 or 7 months, in the world of high-end digital SLRs. The resolution of image sensors and the resolving power of lenses has gotten to the point where we're actually at the resolution limits of what can be done with anti-aliasing filters. And we have found, and other manufacturers have as well, that by removing the anti-aliasing filter, you can extract a little bit more resolving power out of the sensor to take it up to the resolving power of its full potential when it's coupled with lenses that can really take advantage of it, and you have a shooting style that can take advantage of it as well. However, it's important to realize that once detail or repeating detail in a scene reaches the same spatial frequency as the pixel arrangement on an image sensor, moire and color falsing are an unavoidable consequence. So this is true for any digital camera. It's true for the RX1R as well. And it's important for potential customers to realize that if your workflow, routinely encompasses RAW, and you have the experience to really get the most out of your images, then the RX1R does offer some very real advantages, a little bit more resolving power. But if that's not your shooting style, if you're, if you're a JPEG shooter, for instance, the advantage that the R provides is going to be less and less, and the vulnerability to moire and color falsing is going to be greater and greater. So it really depends upon your workflow and your shooting style.
And the nature of what you're shooting.
Yeah, and what we've done with the RX1R is we've given you those shooters who have that workflow and have that desire in their shooting to take fullest advantage of the image sensor and the lens combination.
Okay.
So just to add to that, when I'm processing my raw files, I'll use a program called Capture One. Mm-hmm. And it's a high-end, kind of like Lightroom, raw processor. Mm-hmm. It has built in a filter for moire and that kind of artifacting. So with the RX1R, I will run my raw file through Capture One, minimize any issues that I might have with that, because as a photographer, I want my images to have the highest resolution possible. I did some rodeo shots. I took the RX1R to the rodeo and did some shots. And I wanted to be able to kind of almost reach in. I wanted to feel the texture. And I wanted to capture that texture. I wanted you to almost be able to reach into the photo and feel the side of the horse or the rigging on the horse, and just to convey the textures and the feeling and the colors. And so to have the option to have that highest resolution and then not really have much of a concern because of in post-production, I'll take care of that aliasing. Mm-hmm. It's an ideal solution.
Nice.
So the RX1R is great for particularly outdoor photographers, nature photographers, those scenes where the repeating geometric patterns are not going to be present. Obviously, if you're an outdoor photographer or a nature photographer, you're going to run into that almost never. At the same time, you do have to be prepared to manage the effect of having the filter removed in post. If you're not a photographer who's experienced in the area of post-production, the RX1 delivers the performance that it's so famous for in probably a more appropriate package.
All right, thanks guys. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Amy, this one's for you. We're going to switch gears a little, maybe not as technical.
Okay.
This one comes from Vers Lemore from Twitter. Okay. Now, will the RX line have Wi-Fi capability? Go ahead and speak to that.
Currently, as I mentioned before, the RX100 Mark II is our first NFC camera, or with built-in NFC. It is also our first, one of our first cyber shots in the RX lineup with Wi-Fi. So NFC is kind of an encompassing technology. NFC is just the key in the door, if you will. The connection between the camera and your smartphone, the camera and your tablet, is still made by Wi-Fi. It's just by touching the two devices together, you don't necessarily need to input a lot of passwords or anything. It just says, hi, I'm here, I have information. Okay, fine, I can take that information. So it's just that little handshake, if you will. So right now, the only one with Wi-Fi built in is the RX100 Mark II, and there is currently no way to add it to the other models.
Okay, and moving forward, do you think this is something we're going to see as a more trending
NFC,
feature?
you know, we introduced a few new smartphones and at CES this year with NFC. We have our new Xperia Z tablet with NFC. NFC was kind of the buzzword for the industry along with 4K. So, and I will point out all these cameras are capable of shooting 8K. So when that time comes, you know, you're more than able to shoot 4K images with the cameras. So it is something that is growing, that as people are willing to adopt more technologies and realizing that, yeah, my smartphone is good, but it's not a good camera. It's good for other things. But you know, for me, I still want to be able to take a picture and send it back to the office immediately or do whatever. And taking it with my smartphone, I just don't want to do. So RX100 Mark II, I take a great picture, touch it to my smartphone, have that NFC and Wi-Fi capability to easily send it out to whoever.
Okay, all right, thanks, Amy. All right, our next question comes from Ustream, actually. This is Jonathan Stewart. Mark, this question is for you. Can we expect to see this new sensor technology in larger sensors?
So I guess that's another great question. So I guess the reference is to the RX1R sensor technology that's used in the RX100 Mark II. It is true that the 100 Mark II is the first usage of a 1-inch type sensor with the RX1R or backside illuminated technology. I would say that the future holds many things. We can't always comment on what we're doing next. But suffice it to say that the balance of performance advantage versus cost, essentially, is a great match for the 1-inch type sensor. The idea of using reverse structure or backside illuminated in large image sensors hasn't been done up until now, largely because as the pixel size increases with the very large imagers, the advantage of backside structure decreases. So there is a leveling of ROI, if you will, as the image sensor gets larger. There are, for instance, no SLRs, APS-C, or full-frame sensors which use the backside illuminated technology. We picked the 1-inch size because we think that that's a great match between the area of the sensor, the advantage that's realized, about a 40% increase in sensitivity, and the overall cost of the technology, cost of manufacturing. So we think that the RX100 Mark II sets a pretty good benchmark in terms of performance advantage, and we expect that the 1-inch size sensor will be a great sort of a sweet spot between the cost of manufacture and the benefit received. So
Okay.
we do see this as a great movement forward in sensor technology.
Okay, excellent. Now, Mark, one more question for you. This one comes from Rytron on Twitter. Will there be a firmware update to the original RX100 to enable 24p recording?
We have not. That's a great question, too. Obviously, there's limitations to what we can do in terms of revealing what we're doing next. And the best I could offer as an answer to that question is we haven't announced any firmware updates for RX100 at this time. I realize that's not as positive an answer as I'm sure you'd like, but that's about the limit of what I can say.
So you actually kind of jumped ahead in a sense, because I was just going to ask you, are there any firmware updates in the camera that maybe are going to speak to, hey, if I want some of the new features coming out, but maybe I should wait and not get another camera, can I do a firmware update? Are there going to be some tech limitations on something like that?
Yeah, it's important to realize that there are things that can be done with firmware updates, and then there are other things that cannot be done with firmware updates. Anything that regards hardware or anything that regards hard encoded data in the system architecture, you can't really change that with firmware updates. So there is a common misconception that just about anything can be added with a firmware update, and there are limitations. But unfortunately, I can't provide any direct answer in terms of what we're going to offer for RX100 at the moment. I would say that there are characteristics of the Mark II that can never be added to the RX100, certainly not through firmware. We can't change the image sensor structure through firmware. We can't add the multi-interface shoe through firmware, things like that, for sure. So if those are advantages or requirements that the Mark II provides, then yeah, I mean, that comes with the Mark II, not the RX100 itself. However, it's important to realize that the RX100, the virtues that it brings, the lens, the sensor, the processor, the compactness, all of those things are echoed in the 100 Mark II. So we see the RX100 as still retaining a significant relevance to the photographers that have enjoyed its capabilities.
All right. Now, as a general question, and I'm going to direct this towards Amy, what is the price of the RX100 Mark II, and are there going to be any sort of intro discounts or offers with the Mark II?
Okay, well, the RX100 Mark II will have a $100 premium over the RX100, the current RX100. And, you know, keep in mind, this is not a replacement model. It is not going to get rid of the RX100. It's just a sibling model, if you will, or, you know, for a customer that maybe has to have a tilting LCD screen, or just something that the RX100 doesn't offer. I personally, the RX100 is the camera that's always in my purse. It is my go-to. I absolutely love that piece. So, you know, in talking to people, we are, you know, we're keeping up with demand, but it is a very sought-after camera. So I wouldn't expect to see any pricing discounts or anything like that on the RX100 Mark II either, because, you know, we're selling as many as we make. So, you know, it's a very hot piece. I'm very excited to get it out there, and the buzz since we announced it just last Thursday has been very impressive over all of the new models now.
Okay, thanks, Amy. All right, so our next question, Jeff, this is for you. Now, we've seen and we've heard a lot that you've been versed in these cameras. You were lucky enough to have gone out and sort of shot around with them. Mm-hmm. We're just getting some questions in about what your experience was. Sort of, I know you talked about it a little bit. You took, you know, mm-hmm. the cameras out to the rodeo. Can you talk a bit more about the performance, the handling, just some of your personal insight on these cameras from your experience?
One of the, what I love about the RX1R, and again, you know, in the short time that I had to play with it, I did take it on a trip where I was flying into the rodeo, and until this rodeo trip, I shot everything on a film rangefinder camera, a camera called the Contax G2. And what I loved about shooting with the Sony RX1R was that it gave me a rangefinder film experience in a digital camera. I was able, you know, what I love is that I'm able to set, when I'm shooting, I set it to aperture priority. I'm able to manipulate the iris with the aperture ring on top of the camera. I was able to, and I always shot with the electronic viewfinder. And so I would run around and take my pictures, you know, like I was shooting with a film camera, which to me, as an old school photographer, having learned photography through film and then, you know, transitioned to digital only in the past few years, you know, to be able to really just think about the image without getting too technical, knowing that, okay, I'm at a 2.8.2, I mean, looking at the situation and having just a simple, unobtrusive camera to work with, it was ideal. And one of the things that I love also about the ergonomics of this camera, the menu structure is really logical. It's intuitive. It was very easy for me to navigate. And again, another thing, on the back of the camera, it has this function button, which gives me quick access to all the important settings that I need right away.
So you don't have to fumble around.
I don't at all. And so
do something very quickly.
Exactly. When I'm in the heat of the moment, trying to catch a moment, this camera was really easy to work with in that sense.
Great. Okay. All right. So our next question, Amy, this one is for you. This one comes from RevNet 2016 from Twitter. And Amy, they want to know, how is the zoom on the RX100 Mark II compared to the HX50V?
Wow, okay. Well, we're in two totally different categories here. The RX100 and the RX100 Mark II both have an equivalent of a 3.6x optical zoom. Now, the HX50, while very similar in size, is a 30 times optical zoom. But part of the reason we can get such a big zoom in such a small camera, if you will, with the HX50 is the sensor is smaller. Remember, in the RX100 and RX100 Mark II, the big advantage here, if you will, is that it has a big sensor. So you're getting, the picture quality you'd normally get in a larger camera, but in something very compact. And unfortunately, we can't change the laws of physics. So it's either a big zoom, big sensor. You have to choose one or the other. Yeah. So, like I said, it's my go-to piece. It's my travel camera. It's more than adequate for what I do. If you're into doing a lot of distance shooting, maybe you're doing a lot of sports or wildlife or something like that, the HX50 might be a better choice for you. The one question I always find difficult to answer is when somebody says, "What's the best camera?" And well, what do you do with it? Your needs may be different than mine. So, is the RX100 or RX100 Mark II the best camera we have? It depends on what you're doing. For me,
that sort of brings us back to what we were saying earlier between the RX1 and the RX1R.
Exactly.
What are the applications? What is the nature of what you're shooting? And then sort of scale it down from there and pick the camera that's best for those needs.
Correct. That's that's
important.
why we make a variety. So we have
Right.
something for everyone. It isn't a one-size-fits-all category.
Okay, thanks, Amy. All right, so our next question, this one comes from Twitter. This is from One Life So Live It. This one's for you, Mark. When can we expect to see the RX2, the interchangeable lens version of the RX1?
Excellent question. How did I know that was coming?
It's inevitable.
What a surprise. Well, and again, I apologize in advance for not being able to provide a specific and direct answer to the question because I can't. But it has been rumored, and I believe everything I read, so it's been rumored that we'll offer an interchangeable lens full frame camera in almost imminently. But I can't say that that's true. I can only say that that's what I've read. But suffice it to say that we've demonstrated that we can do this because last year we introduced a camcorder, the NEX VG900, that uses the same 24 megapixel full frame image sensor that we use in the A99 and the RX1 with an interchangeable lens E-mount on it. So we already have that product in the market in the form of a video camera. So the presence of the VG900 has led many to speculate that we'll offer that in a still camera right around the corner. So
as of right now, no.
We can't comment on what we will do in the future, but obviously there's plenty on the internet that predicts what Sony will do.
And really quickly, just since we're on this, can you maybe tell us why it's a 35 millimeter fixed lens on this camera in particular?
Yeah, a lot of what we were able to do with the RX1 is really unique to this camera. I mean, no other camera has ever realized, no other digital camera has ever realized a full-frame image sensor in a body and lens that will literally fit in the palm of your hand. It's never been done before, and since the RX1's introduction last fall, no one has even attempted to do it since. And a lot of it has to do with the advantages realized by having a non-interchangeable lens camera. Obviously, we know that there are many, many advantages to an interchangeable lens camera, the versatility and the way you can adapt the camera to task by having numerous interchangeable lenses. However, by having a non-interchangeable lens, or a fixed lens as we like to call it, we can match the lens to the sensor in a way that would be very difficult with interchangeable lens. We can also realize a compactness of size that would be very difficult to realize any other way. It's difficult to see just by holding it in your hand, but much of the lens that's on the RX1 is actually inside the body of the camera. The image sensor can be seen right here. I don't know if you can see the index mark is here, so you can tell where the image sensor is. And there's a fair amount of the lens that's actually inside the camera. To echo what Amy said previously about the HX50 and the RX100, what many fail to understand is that the size of the image sensor will dictate the size of the lens. There is a direct link that can't really be broken between the size of a lens and the size of the image sensor. And in the case of the RX100, we use a 3.6x lens. In the case of the HX50, we use a 30x lens, even though the cameras are approximately the same size. How come? Well, it's largely because the image sensor in our RX100 is about 4 times the size of that in an HX50. In the case of an RX1, you look at the lens here, and it's about the same size, well, the same length, shall we say, as the lens in an RX100. Well, a lot of that's because the image sensor in an RX1 is about 2.5 times the area of even an APS-C sensor. So in this case, the lens itself is remarkably compact to the size that you'd find on a full-frame SLR.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why it's really the only full-frame camera that will fit in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, pretty small. All right, so our next question comes from Amazon.com from iSom, and Amy, this one is for you. Is the lens the same as the old RX100?
Between the RX100 Mark II and the RX100, yes.
I'm assuming so, yeah.
Yes.
I love how people are already calling it old.
I know, exactly. It's not old. It's been thoroughly tested, and like I said, I love it. But yes, it is the same lens, so there is no difference there. One thing that has changed, which is kind of exciting with the RX100 Mark II, is the way you can zoom on the camera. So you do have multiple ways to control the zoom. You have a little lever, which a lot of point-and-shoot customers are familiar with, and you can use that to zoom in and zoom out. But you also have a ring around the lens here, which you can set for zoom control. Now, you can do that on the RX100 Mark II as well, but you can set it to stop at certain points. So you can set it to stop at certain kind of fixed focal lengths, if you will, like 35 millimeter, 28, 70, So you have various kind of stop points, if you will. So if you are a DSLR shooter and you're normally shooting with a 50 millimeter lens in a particular situation, you'll know exactly with the camera, where 50 millimeters would look like with this particular sensor.
And I'm assuming you guys just chose those focal lengths because they're popular. Again, the 50 is sort of like a portrait. So it seems like you took a nice wide variety and then just programmed those in so it's easy for the user to hit those.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, Amy. All right, so this next question is from Robin from Amazon.com. This question is from Mark. Mark, does the new RX100 Mark II keep the photo capture simultaneously during video capture as a previous model did?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it's important to realize that the feature set of RX100 Mark II and RX100 is really, as a camera, is really quite similar. The Mark II, of course, adds in a versatility and a connectivity component that's not found in the original RX100, but the devices and the feature set and the capability as a camera are really largely the same. As Amy was saying, the lens is the same. It's exactly the same lens. The image sensor size is the same. The pixel count is the same. So it's a 1-inch type sensor with 20.2 megapixels. As a camera, it's really very, very similar. Its differences, there is, of course, a difference in sensitivity from the RX1R sensor, but from a picture quality standpoint, it's really quite similar. There's a difference in movie capture offering 24p, but other than that, the majority of the differences, almost all of the differences, have to do with the usability and the use case of the shooter. So the versatility afforded by the multi-interface shoe, the connectivity realized by the Wi-Fi, those types of things are the primary difference. It's an application more than it is a camera difference. The camera differences have to do with the sensitivity for low light applications and the 24p for video applications. But other than that, as a camera, it's really largely the same. And the capture features are largely the same as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mark. Okay. So this next question is from M. Crespi from Amazon.com. And Amy, I'm going to go ahead and direct this to you. Does the RX100 Mark II have a filter thread for ND or polarizers?
It does not, and part of that is in keeping it very compact. You know, the lens does tell us it does fold back into the body, but we do have accessories that will allow you to adapt filters to the camera if you'd like. And this, in particular, is a 49mm thread here, and this will actually attach right to the lens on the camera. So it just adds a slight bit of depth, if you will, but still totally pocket-sized. And then that will allow you to thread filters onto there as you choose in 49mm size.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
No problem.
All right, so our next question is from Ustream, from Vladimir. Now, Amy, this question is for you. The RX100 Mark II, the pictures looked softer compared to those of the RX100. Was this done on purpose?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the pictures came
I'm not
from.
sure exactly. I'm not sure
yeah.
which pictures exactly. I mean, the difference, you know, as Mark said, most everything in the camera is the same. Obviously, the sensor is the same size. It is backside illuminated. That will help with low light performance, but it's still the same pixel count. So there should be, you know, there is no difference in overall, you know, softness or anything like that of the image. One thing that has been added to both the RX100 Mark II and the RX1R is that they now do support triluminous color, which is something that our TVs support. And the easy way I like to describe this is it's a bigger box of crayons. The camera is capable of reproducing more color. So your images are sharper, more colorful, if you will, because you have more crayons to recreate the image. So that is new on both of the cameras, and that's one of those things you can't see. You know, the shoe you can see, the tilting screen you can see, the Wi-Fi logo, but there are some inside things like the backside illuminated and triluminous color, which you can't see on the cameras.
Okay, all right. Now, same the same viewer, Vladimir from Ustream, he wants to do a follow-up question with you, Jeff, and he wants to know, have you seen any softness between the two cameras because you use both of them?
I have had no issues with softness with the camera. I think it's the user where you'll find the softness. I mean, if you're using the cameras properly, if you focus, I mean, the cameras have the resolution, and you know, if you're using them properly and you're focusing, you'll get a sharp image. I mean, the image quality is, in my experience with these cameras, using these cameras in the real world, the image quality has been terrific.
Okay.
Sharp, good resolution, good color rendition. You know.
So from somebody who's actually used it,
totally.
The sharpness is there.
And to address the point specifically, if there are image sample comparisons being done from initial users who have received samples, again, the ability to judge sharpness in images taken already, keep in mind, unless you're downloading full-size sample images and taking a look at them very closely, the impression of sharpness may be mistaken. Additionally, it's also important to point out that the number of RX100 Mark IIs and the number of RX1Rs that are in circulation right now is very limited. They're all of pre-production status. So if image quality judgments are being made that there are discernible differences in image performance, I would say it's a little early for that.
Okay, that's a good point.
But suffice it to say that the imaging structure from the standpoint of the image sensor, the lens, the processing pipeline, to notice differences in sharpness would be very difficult to realize. And if people are drawing those judgments at this point, keep in mind that the cameras at this stage of development are pre-production. So there shouldn't be any differences, that's for sure. RX1Rs are going to have a detail improvement in resolving power. You know, lines per picture height are going to be a little bit higher depending upon the scene. But the idea that there are going to be softer images from the 100 Mark II than the 100 would be very much at odds with the structure of the cameras.
Okay. And again, it's something to keep in mind that these images, once they're reduced down and maybe compressed, you know, they're not going to hold that integrity.
Yeah, I mean, these cameras are going to be fully tested very soon by noted reviewers, and I think everyone should wait until those results are realized before drawing any conclusions.
Okay, all right. Now Now our next question comes from Min Vu from Amazon.com. Mark, this question is for you. Does the RX1R have optical image stabilization? And if so, can you tell us a little bit more about this feature?
Yeah, from the beginning, the RX1, the structure of the RX1 is not, it really can't manage to have optical image stabilization. Again, it's important to understand the design of a full-frame camera and the design of a wide aperture lens. Again, it's pretty much the same challenge that's faced with digital SLRs. If you look at the world of digital SLRs, particularly in the area of full-frame, wide aperture lenses for full-frame digital SLRs in standard focal lengths simply don't exist. There are no 35mm f2 optically image stabilized lenses for full-frame cameras, or f1.4s for that matter, simply because the size of the glass elements and the size it would take to shift them to perform optical image stabilization would yield size and cost that would be very difficult to manage. So just like full-frame digital SLRs and the lenses that they work with, RX1 nor RX1R can manage optical image stabilization, particularly within the size and the cost structure. So neither camera has any optical image stabilization.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mark. Now our next question comes from Jeff Anderson from Facebook. Amy, this question is for you. Why the high price on the viewfinders?
It seems like such a simple thing. Oh, it's just, it's just an accessory to add on. But the amount of technology that goes in there, as Mark said, it is an OLED viewfinder. It is a high quality OLED viewfinder that we're using. I mean, a lot of times people, when they think viewfinder or they hear electronic, and we were discussing this before, that it's like, oh, I've seen those before. It looks like looking through a screen door, or it's just not clear. And the clarity that you get with this viewfinder, the fact that you can manually focus with it and trust it is outstanding. So there is a lot of technology that goes into this, viewfinder specifically. Now for the optical viewfinder that we do offer for the RX1 and RX1R, that is Zeiss glass that we are using in it. It's a 35 millimeter optical viewfinder. It is high quality glass that we're using. You're buying a high quality camera. There's no sense in buying a cheap plastic, or something that's not going to keep up with what the lens or the sensor is capable of in the camera. So it's all about giving you the best experience and the best quality overall. And the fact that the viewfinder is OLED, that it does draw power from the camera. It's more than just a viewfinder. There's a lot of technology that actually goes into this.
And I mean, in fairness, we acknowledge that there are those that have performed a calculation on some of the cameras that we make with an OLED viewfinder and those without an OLED viewfinder, and they look at the cost difference between models, and then they say, well, if the cost of the feature is this much in these models, how can it be that it costs this much as a separate accessory? And we recognize that there is we'd certainly like to be able to offer it for a lower cost. Part of the difference and part of the cost of the EV1MK is because it's not built into the product, it's available as a separate accessory. There's a whole cost structure that fits into that as well. So we recognize that many would like to see the viewfinder available at a lower cost, and certainly we do everything we can to make that possible. But it's important to realize that the cost of the product as a separate piece is quite different than it is the cost calculation that people are doing when they compare models that have a built-in viewfinder versus the others. But we acknowledge the concern.
There are also a number. The electronic viewfinder, from a user's standpoint, I don't want to imply that there's no adjustment from optical to electronic. There was for me, but it's very brief, and now there's I don't think about it when I'm shooting. But what I appreciate about having an electronic viewfinder is that it will give me different display options. One of the features that the Sony camera has is a level option. So if I want to make sure that my frame is square, I have that option to select that into the viewfinder. For different white balance options, I'll see my white balance in the viewfinder. for when I'm rolling film or doing the digital movie camera. I'm able to use the viewfinder and still have all the information again handy without taking my eye away and looking at the back of the camera.
Right.
So there's a lot of utility, added utility that you're getting with the electronic viewfinder that you don't always have with an optical.
With an optical, okay. So was it an easy transition for
Very,
you?
very easy transition.
Okay.
And I'm at the point now where I pick up the camera, it's electronic viewfinder, I don't really think about it.
Nice, okay. That's important
It
to know.
almost spoils you too.
It
when you
does.
go back to a camera with an optical viewfinder.
I was just going to say, are you expecting now to see some of those, some of that information when you look into the optical viewfinder?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not
Or,
there
with the cameras, they have picture effects, so you can do partial color or black and white, and you don't get that with an optical viewfinder.
Yeah.
With electronic, I know exactly what my picture is going to look like as I take it, and I don't have to hold the camera out at arm's length.
I mean, when I'm I'm always shooting in RAW, but I want, and I'm always doing post-production, but I want the information those files coming out of the camera to be as close to my final image as possible. So, with the electronic viewfinder, I'm able to see how the camera is set. And that to me is an advantage.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've drifted a little from the initial question, which was about the cost of the electronic viewfinder, to its benefits. But let me also point out the two things that struck me as most beneficial when using this viewfinder, particularly with a camera like this, but also with other cameras as well. The traditional digital camera use style has been to hold the camera up to your face to take the picture and then to pull it down and look at the picture on
Display
the viewfinder for playback to check the image that you captured to see if it's what you wanted. And so you'll find photographers raising, lowering all the time. One thing that an electronic viewfinder will do for you is it stops that motion, because playback of the shot that you just took can take place in the eye-level viewfinder, and that's a very different shooting experience. Another one that's very different, particularly for users of the full-frame camera, the RX1, is that an electronic viewfinder, in addition to being able to show you color and exposure and things like that, it can also show you depth of field. And that's something that no full-frame optical viewfinder camera can do, because the ability to render depth of field, particularly shallow depth of field, which is what you're using a full-frame camera for many times, is limited to what can be shown in the optical viewfinder.
So you're getting a lot more than just that viewfinder. There's a lot of information being displayed in that. So really quickly, one last question before we go. Amy, this is for you, and actually Jeff, you as well. The in-camera picture effects. If you're in picture mode or video mode, can you use them for both? First off the bat?
It'll depend on which of the modes you're looking at.
Okay, and this is particularly for the RX100 Mark II.
Yeah. The number of modes between the RX100 and RX100 Mark II is going to be the same. So you get the same picture effects on both of them. What you can do in video versus still will change depending on, some require more processing than others. Partial color, where you can make everything black and white except for red, yellow, green, or blue portions of the image. That's available for both photo and video. Effects like miniature mode, where it'll basically look like a diorama, or like you're looking at a little miniature model of something. That requires a lot of processing, and that just with the high quality video that you're shooting on here, this is camcorder quality video, it just can't process both at the same time. So there are some that are available in one and not the other, in photo versus still. But I was kind of leery of it at first. I was take the picture the right way first and then adjust it in Photoshop. But I find myself more often than not, I forced myself a few weeks ago to walk around Central Park and just take black and white. And, just kind of, do things a little bit like I used to have to do when I was taking photo classes many, many, many years ago. And it's fun to have that option in camera, to have that capability.
It is absolutely. It is absolutely.
Actually, Jeff, so the question then sort of ended with you. What was your experience using some of these effects in either photo or video?
Well, I just love being creative with the camera. Sometimes it's really fun to do the effects in camera as opposed to sitting at home later over your computer and putting in effects after the fact. So, you know, for me, shooting black and white or shooting with watercolor or illustration or just the different modes that it offers, it's a nice option for me, extra, you know, option for creativity in the moment.
So you can almost sort of do something with the effects, send it straight to your cell phone, upload it, you know, share it socially.
You can share them right away.
And you don't have to go home and post-process all of that. I know sometimes people just sort of forget about it and they never show up online.
Exactly.
What happened to all those pictures you took?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the beauty of having it in camera, is that, you know, we all have these illusions of, oh, I'll edit it later, and, you know, later never comes.
Yeah.
And, you know, the partial color, you know, for St. Patrick's Day or Valentine's Day, you can choose red or green and, you know, upload some pretty cool photos right out of the camera. And the processing in the camera to do those effects is absolutely outstanding. The different modes that you have, and, you know, like you said, the fact that you can use it during video is kind of a nice thing. Because a lot of time picture effects are photo only, and video is just normal full color. But here you have that option.
And, you know, again, one thing that's nice from the user and utility standpoint is that they're all very readily available via that function button that I tend to like so much on the back of the camera. So it's easy to access quickly.
Okay. Now, do you guys have anything maybe else to add as sort of an overall, just before we wrap here?
I'm glad there's a lot of good questions out there.
Yeah, there's a lot. So it seems like there's a lot of interest in both of these cameras, especially for either people who are looking to buy or people that have already, you know, invested in either the RX1 or the RX100. So it seems like, you know, I think generally what I've been seeing sort of from the YouTube comments are, is this an upgrade? You know, why is the price of one going to go down? So maybe that's just one more question we have here is, will we see a price drop in the original models, or do you think that they're going to go ahead and retain at this point?
From the best of my knowledge, they're going to remain pretty consistent because we're not targeting the same customer with the models. The RX100 and the RX100 Mark II aren't going to necessarily appeal to the same customer. Same, you know, we've gone over it a few times with the RX1 and the RX1R. It's a different customer, so it's not, you know, gosh, which one do I buy? You know, does Wi-Fi appeal to you? If it does, you know, the RX100 Mark II might be an option. But, you know, I've talked to a lot of people that said, you know, I don't care about Wi-Fi in a camera. I'm using it to take pictures. This is what's important to me. Wi-Fi isn't of concern. So the price structure is going to remain the same for right now.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, thank you all so much for coming in and offering up your expertise. I really appreciate all of your time. Now, if you guys at home have any more questions, we can actually keep this discussion going because we have a panel of experts who are going to be answering those questions. You guys can tweet #RX1 or #RX100, and we'll be able to go ahead and answer those questions. So again, you guys, thank you. And for those of you at home, Mark and I actually did a few videos on both of these brand new cameras. And if you have any questions regarding the expanded specs or want to know a little bit more about those, you can check those out on the YouTube Signal by Sony channel. That's going to be on youtube.com/signal. I'm Olivia Speranza. We'll catch you guys next time.